Yeah.
Coolest guy ever.
Yeah.
He was like my inspiration.
General Kenobi.
Obi-Wan Kenobi. No, I used to have like a little General Grievous Lego Star Wars guy with forearms.
Oh, sick.
It's sick, man. Did you like Lego Star Wars?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was the best,
Yeah,
man.
yeah,
I had
yeah.
so much, man. So, man, I'm excited to talk about this subject today, just
do
to
it.
kind of get right into it. There's no light way to talk about it, but we wanted to share today a bit about lukewarm Christianity and kind of just discuss the dangers of it, the harms of it, I guess, and really kind of confront it head on. And so we're both pastors, so this is something that we kind of deal with on a regular basis. And I feel like it's something that most people don't really realize that they are doing or that they're actually living a lukewarm lifestyle. I don't know if you can agree with that, but I feel like we probably see a lot more people that we would classify as lukewarm Christians than we'd like to admit. And I just wanted to open up the conversation today to kind of discuss like what does this lukewarm Christianity actually look like practically? What are the dangers of it again? And just diving right into it. So yeah, so we have a reel we can react to quick.
Let's do it.
And then let's do it.
You may have crossed the line of faith, and your eternity might be secure in heaven. But if you choose to live a lukewarm life, you might be the greatest tool Satan ever uses to send more people to hell than you could ever imagine. Go extreme, because lukewarm is the most dangerous thing you can ever be for eternity.
Wow, that's brutal. Goodness gracious, man.
Yeah,
How does that hit you?
It's heavy. It is heavy. Yeah, it's you know, when I was at school, in ministry school in Bethel in Redding, California, it was great. Nothing bad to say about them. It was awesome. But I think when I was there, I remember in particular, we always talked a lot about going and changing the world, going to do like big things for Jesus, making history with Jesus. And that was awesome. Like we were really excited to go change the world, do all this amazing stuff. And I think like in church culture in general, like we get so excited about all the things that God's called us to do and the things he wants us to feel and he loves us and he cares for us. And there's room for that. I think we got to be talking about that. Yeah. But then being out of school for a bit, I just realized, man, like we missed this entire conversation of hell, of eternal separation from God. And I think it's something that we naturally try to stay away from as humans because it makes us uncomfortable. Like we don't want to think about, loved ones or strangers going to hell or a neighbor going to hell, right? But we just don't take as seriously our faith, I think, as we should. It's kind of like when you talk about sex trafficking and terrible things happening around the world. It's like your mind kind of automatically has that natural gate, that filter of like, I don't want to think about this. I don't want to ponder on this too much because it's dark. It's kind of messed up, right? And so I think this reality of hell and eternal separation from God, of what like a lukewarm Christian lifestyle looks like, we don't want to think about that often because it's scary. It feels like it's uncomfortable to talk about. But I think it's really important that we talk about it, man. And this he's bang on. So
wow. So you're saying that when you were in school, you noticed a pattern of people talking so much about what they could do outside of themselves that they didn't take enough time to look inward and go, where's my soul actually going? I heard a pastor put it like this. He said, God has more to do in you than through you.
Ooh.
Thought, wow. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
That's the problem, is everyone wants to start their own thing, do their own thing, build their own little K kingdom. And all of a sudden we're going, no, actually, you know what? God has more to do in my own heart.
Yeah.
There's a lot more to clean up that I have control over than stuff out there, solving other people's problems. Why don't I take the plank out of my own eye first instead of trying to go and fix everybody else first? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah, I just think it's like a really dangerous place to live in being lukewarm. And I think, I love what you said, that there's more things that God wants to do in you than through you. And I think it's profound because, there's a lot of Christians out there where I think they are lukewarm maybe in their passion for God, where they're not passionate after God. Yeah. I heard a pastor say, you can go to the Super Bowl and you're raising your hands and you're losing your mind. You're just so excited about your team winning or whatever. Yeah. And you're so passionate, but then you come to church and you sit on your hands. And it's like this natural passion people have for sports is something they love, but not for Jesus, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that that's like what's gonna like send you to hell, separate you from God at all. I'm not saying that, but I think like there's a real passion that we're missing for the Lord.
Yeah.
But I also think there's like a lot of ways people are living that is lukewarm that they are not aware of, and so I kind of want to dive into some of these things, man.
Sure, absolutely. And you know what? Like in Greek, you can set up a verb. So in the Bible, it's written in Greek, right? You can set up a verb so that it's either talking about something or it's talking about something in the past, or it's a command. You know, if I say stop, instead of saying he stopped, I'm saying it in the past. But if I say stop, I'm commanding you to stop. Well, at the end of Philippians, Paul says, rejoice. And again, I say, rejoice.
Yeah.
It's a command. You know, so even my emotions are not this optional second part to my faith. It's a commandment to me that I go and find joy in the Lord, and God is expecting me to go and do it, to change the attitude of my heart. Sometimes we get focused on the outcome. We're a little Western about it. You know, I'm all focused on the end product. The ends justify the means. I want to build. See results. And God's going, you know what? I have more to do in you. I want to change your heart first, and then you can go and be a light to others. But if you're a city that's set on a hill that cannot be hidden, and there's rot in there, that rot is on full display as well.
Yeah.
You know, if there's darkness in your heart that you haven't dealt with, if there's sin in your life, that's why Paul says to Timothy, whatever you do, just stay blameless. Because he's a pastor in this new place. And, you know, everybody's criticizing him. Everybody's pointing fingers. He's a young pastor. And he's going, just whatever you do, Timothy, stay blameless. Don't let anybody be able to point a finger at you, because they can see the rot in you just as much as they can see the light.
Yeah. I want to ask you a question really quick here. Oh, there you go. But really quick, I just want to talk about this story. It's pretty popular. It's the fence story of the guy sitting on the fence. We've talked about it on this podcast, I think, before. But I think it's really fitting for this situation we're talking about. And the story is basically this guy has this dream where he's sitting on this fence, and he has heaven on one side, and he sees all the angels, he sees Jesus, he sees heaven, all of its glory on one side, and then on the left side he sees the devil and all of his demons and all of the darkness around there and fire. And as he's on this fence, Jesus and the devil approach him, and Jesus reaches his hand out and says, "Hey, would you take my hand?" And the guy looks at him and says, "Listen, like, I don't know if I'm ready to commit to you. I don't know if I believe in you yet. I don't know if I believe in the religion of Christianity, so I'm not going to take your hand." And then he looks at the devil, and he kind of is, waiting for the devil to reach his hand out to him. And the devil says to him, he says, "Why didn't you reach out your hand to me?" And the devil says, "Well, the fence belongs to me." And it's the reality of like the fence that we are on often, this fence of us not being committed to Christ, of actually living one foot in the world, one foot in the kingdom. That's actually the devil's territory, right? And so I just think it's a very profound story, because I think there's a lot of people out there that are living in that place where they have one foot in the world, one foot in the kingdom, where they're committed to Christ, but then they're also trying to be committed to worldly ways in their sinful life, right? And so that territory, though, that belongs to the enemy, and I think a lot of people don't really realize that. And so anyways, that story, I want to lead into the question is there ever a time, or has there been a time where you've been lukewarm in your faith, where you've maybe not been as passionate about Jesus, or maybe just kind of living one foot in the world, one foot in the kingdom?
Oh my gosh. I saw this clip once of a girl comes up to John MacArthur, and she goes, "I think I'm saved, but I struggle with sin. And sometimes I'm lukewarm, and I'm like half in, half out.
Yeah.
And how do I know that I'm saved?" And first of all, he you could see the compassion in his heart as an old pastor, right? He's just looking at her. He goes, "Join the club." Like this, it's all of us. You know what I mean? Like we all struggle daily with crucifying the old man and putting him to death. You know, he always creeps up. It's like I'm carrying around this corpse of who I used to be, and the infection seeps in. And yeah, of course I've struggled with that. I still struggle with it. And yes, absolutely, because my heart is always being torn in the other direction. Most of my life has been spent in lukewarm Christianity. And eventually you get to the point where you're like, God, give me that same nausea that you have towards lukewarmness in Revelation, where he says, "You're not hot, you're not cold. I'll spit you out of my mouth."
Yeah.
Like I literally want to throw you up. You make me want to puke because you're so lame. You don't move.
Yeah.
You know, I heard
Yeah.
somebody say once, "God can't steer a parked car,"
Yeah.
and I don't like saying words like "God can't," but who can steer a parked car? You know what I'm saying? Like, you must be moving in a direction. Have some oomph about you. Like, go have some passion. Have some direction. But I find oftentimes fear and anxiety is paralyzing. I was talking to my sister yesterday. She goes, "You know, I want to learn more about the Bible so that I can have the confidence to go and boldly talk about my faith." I go, "Good for you for taking initiative. That's awesome." And I think, you know what? Learning more about the Word helped a lot. Because then I had a reason to give myself. I had an argument. I had a logic. I had a reasoning for why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Right.
You know what I mean? I knew exactly what my motivation was.
Wow.
Wanted to become a pastor. Wanted to go do missionary work. Wanted to
Right.
go door to door.
Right.
If your foundation for that is loose, then you're like the seed that sprouts up, but then it withers because it doesn't have roots in the ground, right? What about you?
Yeah, no, for sure. I think I'm trying to remember my past life. I mean, I would say previously, like I was definitely in a time where I was not walking with the Lord. So I don't even know if you'd consider it lukewarm Christianity.
But would you have called yourself a Christian back then?
Yeah, for sure. I would have called myself a Christian.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So that's a good point. Yeah, I guess thinking back about that, I definitely thought that my faith alone was good enough. That like me walking with God and me simply believing Him was good enough. And for me,
Or simply saying that you believe Him.
yeah, simply saying I believe. Simply saying I believe. Right?
Yeah,
Simply
and
saying,
really meaning it. And go, yeah, I believe in Jesus. I really mean it. And
yeah,
then,
I'm a Christian. Boom.
Yeah,
That's kind
boom,
of it.
you're in.
That's
Yeah.
kind of my extension
Yeah.
of Christianity. And I think, like, I remember like doing things that were definitely like sinful, like whether it was partying, sleeping with girls, drugs, whatever it was, and I would have these convictions though, like I would do it and then I'd feel guilty afterwards. But the thing is, I would never do anything about it, and I would often just go about sinning, living my life, and I would consider myself being a Christian was me simply having faith in Jesus, and that was enough. And I heard this pastor say one time, he's like, I believe in this light bulb. You can see that it's real. I can see that it's real, but that doesn't do anything for me, right? Is when you put your faith fully into Jesus and actually surrender to Him, that's when you actually have that life change, right? And I just think there's a lot of Christians out there that they think that they're believing that Jesus is God is enough, and even the demons, even the devil believes that Jesus is the Son of God, right?
Yeah.
Matthew 7:21. I can't rehearse scripture as well as Austin, so I read it off of my phone here. But Matthew 7:21 says, "Not everyone who says to me, 'Lord, Lord,' shall enter the kingdom of heaven, but he who does the will of my Father in heaven." And so, I guess what I'm trying to talk about today is the reality that we can struggle and we can be in a place where we are not always passionate, not always dedicated to God, where we do sin, we do mess up. But the idea is that we're actually struggling forward. We're actually struggling forward to overcome these things, right? We're not embracing our sin and actually making a lifestyle out of that. That we're actually moving forward and repenting and being changed, right? And so, I've talked to lots of young men who maybe they have a girlfriend and they casually sleep with her and have sex with her and they're not repentant about it. And so my question to them is, where is your faith? Because if you think about Matthew 7:21 or Revelation 3:16, I'll vomit you out of my mouth. You're neither hot nor cold. It's where are you actually at with God, right? And
yeah, so true. Not everyone who says to me, "Lord, Lord," will enter the kingdom of heaven, but he who does the will of my Father.
Yeah. No, and I just think it's it's just an interesting conversation to have, because I think if you think about the young man who's constantly sleeping with his girlfriend, not repentant of his sin, where I guess I would ask you, where would you say his salvation lies? Because this is kind of like a theological question that maybe we wouldn't talk about often, but for the unrepentant sinner who's embracing a lifestyle of sin, who is sitting on the fence, who is embracing that lifestyle, where would you say they are at? That's a deep question.
Well, you know what? Growing up, I heard a fair amount of preaching which convinced me that if I just said the prayer and really meant it,
Right.
it was as if I got a golden ticket and punched a hole in it, and I'm in.
Right. Yeah.
As long as I meant it.
Yeah,
In other
yeah.
words, it was always go back to that moment. Go back to the prayer. Go back to how you felt back then, and that will be the evidence that you're truly saved. I remember a preacher saying, unless you have the time and the date and you remember exactly how it happened, you don't have it.
That's crazy.
And I go, no, that's not quite right, because I remember reading what Paul the Apostle wrote. He said, examine yourselves to see if you are in the faith. It doesn't say examine yourselves to see whether you joined, or whether you were in at the moment when you prayed the prayer, but whether you are in. And there is no, in James, it says there's no such thing as works without faith or faith without works. They're not one and the same, because it is faith alone that saves you, Romans chapter 3. Because it says, where is boasting then? Boasting is excluded because we're saved by faith alone, apart from the works of the law. Amen. But there is no faith apart from the works of the law. It's the evidence of the faith. How do I show that I have faith? Through my works.
Yeah.
What's a better indicator of what I believe, what I say or what I do? One thing that's interesting for me is I study counseling. Before I ever studied the Bible. And one thing that was made crystal clear to me was this: people will say all kinds of stuff about what they think they believe about the world, but the reality is found in their actions. You can say, in Proverbs it says, the intentions of a man's heart are like deep, dark waters in his chest. In other words, you can say, oh man, when I said that prayer, every part of me was totally in, and I've been like that ever since.
Right.
And you can go back to that moment, back to that moment, back to that moment. But are there, how can I say, if you search deep down into those deep waters in your heart, is there a desire to give glory to God, to take God and put him on display in your life, to give him glory? Or is that not there? Because that desire, MacArthur pointed this out. He goes, that desire, it's not going to come from the enemy. It's not going to come from the world. It's not going to come from your flesh. That desire to make God great only comes from his Spirit.
Wow.
So if you have that in you, in those deep, dark waters in your heart, if you really search deep down and go, do I actually want every part of my life to shine the attributes of God? Yeah. Or am I kind of indifferent about that? Is that desire in me, or is that desire not in me? Because that's a great indicator for whether or not you've got this thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That was a good answer. No, I like that. I just think about a lot of people, I guess, in their lives. Like, I think about people that really get it, like, who are passionate about God, because I have like friends and people that I know that just love the Lord and they're passionate. And then there's people, again, who are kind of stuck in this reality of their own reality of like, okay, I believe in Christ and that is enough. Like, I believe that Christ is real. I believe that Jesus is the Son of God. That's it. That's kind of that's the deal, right? Yeah. And I often just kind of ponder, what is the difference between this person here that is actually genuinely passionate for the Lord, and then the person that just believes in God but lives a life of total sin and depravity. Yep. Sorry, I was waiting for the mic for that. Yep. Hopefully, you guys can hear that. But I often think about, like, what's the difference, right? And I think it often comes back to just people actually encountering the love of God, actually knowing that God is good. I think a lot of the world in general, a lot of people out there, even Christians, don't see God rightly, and I think that is a direct correlation to their passion or their drive for God, and is often a really big determining factor if they're lukewarm or not, right? I when I used to pastor my other church, I remember a lot of people having plans for their lives. Like, I would talk to people and they say, I'm going to go to college and I'm going to get this kind of job. I'm going to get this kind of car. We're going to have a family, move to this place, do that thing. And my question was, in what part of the process do you include Christ in your life, in the planning of your life? And I think that sometimes is, I think, a sign of lukewarm Christianity is when people are thinking about their life, thinking about their journey, and they're not including Christ in the planning of it all. When in reality, it's like all of our plans, everything in our life is meant to be surrendered unto Him, into His purpose, right?
Yeah.
And so I think my question to our listeners, the people listening, is, in the planning of your life, are you including Christ as a maybe side piece that gets you some things that you like, that makes you feel good, or is He actually the centerpiece of your life that you're ultimately surrendered to, that your life is based on? And so, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
In James, it says, a person says, next year I'll go to this country, I'll buy and sell and do that. And he says, instead you ought to say, if it is God's will, we will even live.
Yeah.
And go and buy and sell and do this and that.
Come on.
And so there's this sense in which if everything in my life is dependent on the desire and will of God, things change. I know Christian guys that don't, how can I say? No, I think I need to think this through more. I was about to say they don't ask much of God. Jesus does say, make your petitions known to the Lord. So that's true. But I think there's a sense in which... I lost my train of thought.
Treat God like a vending machine, essentially. Like make your petitions known, but you're going to God.
I got it.
Gotcha.
In James, it says, you ask, but you do not receive because you ask amiss. You ask to spend on your own lusts.
Yeah.
So in other words, we're asking God, give me a girlfriend. Why are you asking for a girlfriend, man? Because you mentioned, is Christ included in your plan? If we zoom all the way out, it's almost as if, is Christ your plan?
Is Christ
Is the glory of Christ your plan?
Yeah.
Why do you want a girlfriend? Is it to get married so you can start a godly family, so you can create godly children, which will change society? If you can create a lasting generational impact on this whole nation by producing God-fearing children, and then you can go impact the church, you can impact business, you can impact different spheres of society. Is that the desire, to shine the glory of Christ? Or is it, I really want to have sex? And then you're like, okay, well, let's go get a girlfriend. I'm thinking short term.
Yeah, for
right?
sure.
So it's not just, is Christ included? Is Christ my plan? At the end of it all, if I zoom all the way out, am I designing my life as a prism through which Jesus shines?
That's so good.
Like that album cover where the white light enters into the triangle and it comes out a rainbow.
Pink Floyd.
Like Pink Floyd. That is my life.
Yeah, that's good.
Christ shines into it, and then in a million unique different ways, either through your bodybuilding or through your business or through your church or through your family, in a million unique different ways, the light of Christ is shone into the world.
Yeah.
I was talking about this on Tuesday. Only 2 people are called the light of the world in the Bible. John chapter 1, it says the Word, Jesus, is the light who gives light to all men. But then in Matthew chapter 5, Jesus turns to his followers and says, you are the light of the world.
Yeah.
So it's me and it's Jesus, and we're shining. And that's the point of my life, is to display the attributes of God. And if that's not what my life is designed around, then I'm living, not to be too harsh, but I am living. The reality is I am living a pointless, a directionless, hedonistic, impulsive life. Because even if people do it unwittingly, even if a father is willing to give his life up for his children, he doesn't even know why.
Right.
But he in that moment, he is showing the love of God because he's made in his image. But what if you did all of that purposefully, not just by accident, but every single aspect of your life was tuned to the same direction. Every single hobby and thought and word was all pointed in one direction. You meet people like that and you're like, wow, how did you get your life like that? If every single aspect of your life is pointed.
That's so good.
Yeah.
That's beautiful, though. I think I've never heard the like the Pink Floyd analogy actually works really well. Like I've never heard that before. I'm going to steal that for my next sermon. That's really good.
Put that in my next sermon.
My next sermon, because I'm preaching this Sunday. No, we're trying to keep these podcasts a little shorter, so we're going to wrap this up in a little bit here. But I just kind of was thinking when you're speaking about just how God, wants to shine through every avenue of your life. He wants to be glorified in every aspect of your life. I was just thinking about culture right now and where we're at as a society. In our podcast, we want to always kind of tie back to culture, and then what does Christ have to say about culture? And I think in our culture, we're in the society as young men where a lot of what we're trying to do right now is leveling up. Like it's like the voice in our society right now is it's your life. You have your opinions. You have your thoughts. Builds your dream. Like it's all centered about you, and that voice is directly in contrast to the gospel. And the gospel is surrender everything, sacrifice everything for Jesus, give your life to him completely, to follow him, and follow him even if it means death. I don't know if it's Matthew. I can't remember if it's Matthew, but it talks about laying our lives down for Jesus, and the implication there is that we would surrender it to him, even to the point of death. Just as his disciples followed Jesus passionately, wholeheartedly, that they were even killed for their own faith. Like that's the type of faith that we are meant to have. Yeah. And so that reality of what it means to be a disciple is in direct contrast to the voice of culture right now. And so I think the reality is that voice from culture is seeping into the church a bit, and so we have young men, young women who are, we live in Vancouver, so it's almost impossible for us to own a house one day. Like we want to make money, we want to actually be successful. It feels like we have to work like 4 jobs to actually eventually pay for a house, and so we're trying to hustle. We're trying to build our lives. We're trying to, hustle and do what is right to make some money and to make a life for ourselves. Mm-hmm. But in the midst of that culture that we have, this hustle culture, we are directly going against often what the gospel is trying to promote, which is to lay our lives down and to surrender that to Jesus, right? Wow. And so that doesn't mean that we don't try to work hard and build our business and try to be successful at all these things. It just means that those need to be laid down first to Jesus. And if he says pick them up, I know, Austin, I want to give you this vocal business that is me. I want to move in that. Chris, I do want you to do this, that, whatever we lay down at the feet of Jesus. Whatever he gives us back, that's what we take and we build, right? But we need to have our lives centered around Jesus and his gospel. So
can I ask you before we end?
Yeah.
In your life now, in the present, what are your challenges with lukewarmness in the day-to-day?
Well, that's good. Oh man, I have to think about that. I'm so not lukewarm. I have to think about it. No, I think the tendency is that of just busyness. Like I think busyness is a word that we just throw around way too lightly and way too often. Like you talk to any person, like every single person, like, hey, how's your week? Busy. Like everyone wants to be busy.
Yeah.
And we are busy. There's a lot going on. I think a perspective that God has been trying to really promote to me is just that my life is full. It's not busy, it's full, right? But anyways, in that busyness, I think it's really easy to just skip over thinking about God and skip over his presence, because I think really often for me, I'm very task oriented. So I have my day and I have all my tasks that I want to complete. Yeah. I have all these things that I want to accomplish. Yeah. And so it's really easy to get task driven and not be presence driven, and to forget about, God, you're right here with me. And I think often I sometimes get into my own feelings, how I feel about things, how I feel about my work, how I feel about a conversation. And I get into my own thoughts. And so for me, being an overthinker as well, it's just like I get kind of stuck in my own reality, in my own life, and I'm not including God in that and even surrendering that all to God. Yeah. It's kind of overtaking my life sometimes.
Yes.
And I just think there's moments where I'm just like, man, I am just absolutely overwhelmed with life right now. And I'm stressed out, this isn't going my way or whatever. And those are times and indicators where I'm like, oh yeah, I have not been focused on Jesus and his presence and his word and what he has to say about my life. And I would say those moments are opportunities to become lukewarm, because I'm not allowing God's presence and his word to infiltrate my life and actually disciple me and make me a more devoted disciple in that moment. I'm usually letting that drive me sometimes. So, wow. I don't know if that made sense, but yeah.
Yeah, practically speaking, in the day-to-day, we're trying to climb this little pyramid in society. But sometimes we forget that the reason why we're doing that is to be able to flip the pyramid on its head and go and serve and be down at the bottom. But I lose that vision for my life in the moment. Sometimes I play Smash Bros with my cousins. I destroy them.
Austin's pretty good at Smash Bros.
I love Smash Bros. But they're small, right? So they're young.
But then they're 5 years old.
Yeah, exactly, right? So then it's okay, so now it's 7-0 or whatever, and now they're not having fun because I got so obsessed with winning the game, I forgot, I actually had a bigger reason why I was playing the game in the first place. But I got so caught up in the moment with winning that I forgot there was a bigger game. There was a meta game that I was playing in the first place that I forgot that I was playing. So then I just started playing Smash Bros. And now I want to win. But I forgot that there was another game that I was playing the whole time. And I think similarly, when we get into the busyness of life, we go, I want to get some money. I want to increase my status. I want to do this and that. And all of a sudden I realized, oh my gosh, the only reason why I was doing that in the first place was to actually do this meta game, which is to make some money so that I can go build the kingdom. So I can give it away. It's not to have the money in and of itself. I want to I want to get rich. I want to get rich. Why? I want to have some resources to build the kingdom. And if I lose vision of that for a second, all of a sudden I'm doing worse than I was in the first place.
Right.
You know?
That's really good.
It's like in at the end of 1 Timothy, he says, those that desire to be rich fall into a trap. And he's talking about pastors.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And so I do think that if at any point we lose vision of the reason why we're doing it in the first place, that's when we fall into a trap.
Yeah, I just want to share a story before we end here. I'm not wearing any rings now, so if you're watching YouTube, you can't see any. But usually I have two rings. I have one on my wedding finger and then one on my my right hand. And it came from this testimony when I was in school. I had this encounter with the Lord in worship where I had my hands raised in worship, just praising the Lord, and I really could sense God's presence. And I saw a vision of the Holy Spirit just came and placed a ring on my finger. And it sounds so lame. I sound like one of those Christian girls who's like, I'm married to Jesus. And not that. But it's like this, but it was just this ring that I felt the Lord put on my finger. And it just resembled like this covenant of love between him and I as father and son. And so I remember him saying to me very specifically, he said, son, if we are not more in love at the end of the day, then you miss the mark. And more specifically, it's more about me being in love with him at the end of the day than I missed the mark, right? And God can't be more in love with me. He loves me infinitely, but there's a lot more love in my heart that I can give God and be more affectionate and compassionate and more in love with him, right? And so I feel like for me, that's been a really solid marker for my life, because any time that I go to the end of my day and I look back, I'm like, Jesus, am I actually more in love with you? Am I actually more devoted to you? Am I more inspired by you? Do I want to spend more time with you? And that's always a really solid marker for me if I've lived a more lukewarm day or a more passive day, right? And just like you were sharing, very similar to what you're sharing, like we have this overarching mantra over our lives, this theme over our lives that we are devoted to Jesus and that he's our king, that we're serving him, that we're in this father and son, father and daughter relationship with God. And if that's not the most important thing, if that relationship didn't grow and expand, then for me, I'm like, I've missed the point of my day, right? And so that's kind of, I guess, probably the biggest indicator for being lukewarm in my day. So anyways, guys, we love you. Thanks for tuning in. We try to keep these podcasts a little shorter, but we love you guys, and we hope that you feel encouraged and convicted and challenged. And we'll see you guys in the next episode.